World of Warcraft Midnight is on the horizon, the official announcement at Gamescom is just a few weeks away, and so far, somehow, these lines from Chris Metzen still encompass basically everything we know about it.
In this chapter, you will be returning to the fabled lands of Quel'Thalas. You will not only help reunify the scattered Elven Tribes of Azeroth, but you will make your stand with the forces of the light and banish the shadow forever.
And so today, ahead of the Midnight reveal, I'm going to give you a crash course on Quel'Thalas, and a little Elven history thrown in for good measure. I'm not saying you're going to be an expert and we're not going to go in depth on every lore event, but by the end of this, you're going to know enough about the region to be able to hold your own in a conversation, and certainly start to speculate about what might happen to the area in Midnight. Enough yapping, let's get into it. Modern-day Quel'Thalas, which means High Home in the Elven tongue, encompasses the northernmost region of the Eastern Kingdoms on the modern WoW map. The actual borders of what defines Quel'Thalas are a little nebulous, but you'd be safe in assuming that the actual zones are the Isle of Quel'Thalas, the Eversong Woods, the Ghostlands, Silvermoon City, and importantly also Zul'Aman. The region is known for being home to the Blood Elves / High Elves and has been for thousands upon thousands of years, but it actually wasn't always that way. This is technically an adopted homeland, and the history of how it became adopted is important. The side of Azeroth that we're familiar with has gone through several ownership and physical changes over our known Warcraft history. It's been controlled by old gods, it's been controlled by trolls, and eventually, Azshara's elves laid claim to the center of it all, the area surrounding the Well of Eternity. Azshara, and her cast of highborn elves in particular, loved to tap into the Well of Eternity, and it eventually led to the cataclysmic event that sundered the supercontinent of Kalimdor into the map we see today. After this, the elves, who found themselves on the western portion, aka modern Kalimdor, started to set up shop and take up druidic magic near Mount Hyjal, except for a portion of the leftover Highborn, led by Dathramar Sunstrider, who felt that they should be allowed to practice arcane magic still, and after a clash with the rest of the Night Elves, were exiled. The Highborn packed up, built some ships, and sailed east to find a new home, eventually landing on what we now know as the Eastern Kingdoms. Now, importantly, their separation from the Well of Eternity was beginning to have some big side effects on the Highborn. They lost the purple hue of their skin, they became shorter, I guess their ears also shrunk, and most importantly, they began to feel the effects of disease and aging. They worked their way across the Eastern Kingdoms, discovering early humans and learning that the humans had settled upon natural ley lines. They followed these ley lines north, eventually bringing them to the area of land that is now Quel'Thalas, which they quickly discovered was inhabited by the Amani trolls still. The Amani hated the elves from back in the days of Azshara, and so tried to drive the elves off. But the elves' mastery of magic allowed them to push the trolls down, and they continued north until they found a convergence of ley energy. A conveniently placed lake in the middle of this allowed Dathramar to reveal that he had stolen a vial of the Well of Eternity's power, which he poured into said lake, thus creating the sunwell. The sunwell was definitely weaker than the Well of Eternity, but still dramatically improved the elves' connection to magic and abilities, and importantly, reminded them of how important it is to like and subscribe if you enjoy a video, and especially how powerful it is to leave a comment. You can write whatever you want down there. You can write papaya for all the elves care. Every bit of engagement helps. Proclaiming themselves saved, they declared Dathramar Sunstrider their king, named the land Quel'Thalas, and would eventually themselves become known as Quel'Dorei, the High Elves. They pushed the Amani trolls all the way back to the latter's stronghold of Zul'Aman, and then set to work building out their kingdom. The Amani didn't stay down forever though. Remember, this portion of land the High Elves took over was their home, and it had been for a very, very long time. Far enough back that there's even record, one mentioned specifically, of the Amani having clashed with the Akir, the bug-like race of old god followers, on this land back in the day, with Akir ruins deep below the land. Maybe keep that one in your mind for Midnight. And so many, many, many years later, with the help of the Zandalari, the Amani moved in on the elves and started wiping out entire swaths of the population. The elves weren't winning this fight, and so Anastarian Sunstrider, the now king of the High Elves, struck a deal with the human empire of Erethdor to the south. They would help the elves fight the Amani, and in exchange, the High Elves would teach 100 humans how to use magic. This conflict was known as the Troll Wars, and the alliance of the humans and elves ultimately led to its end, when the 100 human mages and the elven mages ended up summoning down a column of fire that completely devastated the Amani forces. This relationship between the Empire of Erethdor and High Elves would remain through the years, empires. Importantly to newer lore, it would eventually lead to a group of humans and elves sailing off from the Eastern Kingdoms to the other side of Azeroth, where they would found the Arathi Empire that we see some of in Hollowfall. We know virtually nothing of the specific circumstances surrounding this departure, but I'd be willing to bet that Midnight will provide the opportunity for Blizzard to flesh this history out a little more. Quel'Thalas would continue to find itself involved in the conflicts of the world as time pressed on. In the Second War, it came under attack after Zul'Aman and the Amani joined forces with the Orcish horde to push north. But the Orcs eventually pulled back to attack Lordaeron instead, which Zul'Aman viewed as an incredible act of cowardice, and the Amani were defeated as a result. Over the course of that same conflict, though, the humans also pulled away from helping Quel'Thalas, which led to Anasterion exiting the Alliance. They'd remained functionally distinct from the Alliance until one of the most iconic events in Warcraft history. When Arthas Menethil, Humanity Golden Boy turned Death Knight Lichlord, marched across Quel'Thalas so that he could resurrect Kel'Thuzad using the Sunwell. This is almost inarguably the event that has had the largest impact on the modern map of Quel'Thalas, since the giant strip of dead land through the region is directly a result of this. This conflict is also where Sylvanas Windrunner's soul was famously ripped from her body, turning her into a banshee as she failed to defend the kingdom. Quel'Thalas had fallen. The use of the Sunwell to resurrect Kel'Thuzad had turned it into a dark, twisted source of death energy, and so Kael'thas Sunstrider, who had been in Dalaran when Arthas attacked, led a band to destroy the Sunwell. In the wake of its destruction, he renamed the remaining elves the Sin'dorei, or Blood Elves, a race that now found themselves in a similar position to their ancestors millennia before, starved of their magical resource. Over the course of the rest of this war, the Blood Elves worked with the Night Elves and the Naga, who importantly were also elves themselves. Check out the N'Zoth video I'm linking on screen right now if you want a little more on that, to help the Alliance. Eventually, the Blood Elves would learn to siphon arcane energy from the things around them to help sustain themselves without the Sunwell. Flashing forward, these Blood Elves would eventually join the Horde after Sylvanas reached out to her former people. And with that, we find ourselves around the timeline of the Burning Crusade expansion pack. This expansion also found champions back clashing with Zul'Aman, which we'll dive into in just a second, and ultimately found the now villainous Kael'thas corrupting the Sunwell once more. With the help of Velen and the Naaru, though, the Sunwell was able to be purified instead of destroyed, satisfying the magical cravings that had plagued the Blood Elves. The crazy thing is, that kind of catches you up to what we know about the region of Quel'Thalas to date. Since Burning Crusade, the entire region has kind of remained locked in time, not just from a gameplay perspective, but also from a narrative perspective. We don't hear a ton about what, how, and if the region has changed over time, particularly the Blood Elf controlled lands. The notable exception to this is the Troll Kingdom of Zul'Aman, which got a new iteration of its dungeon during Cataclysm. The thing I really want to touch on about Zul'Aman is that in lore it is, and has been, a giant sprawling center point of the Amani kingdom. But in game, it's only ever been represented as an instance. If you look at these maps as well, even in modern day, there's a decent mismatch in terms of the landmass that's shown versus what's actually explorable and applicable. I'm going to do a second, probably shorter video where I slam through a bunch of things that I think Midnight could, should, or might do to change Quel'Thalas. But one of the big ones is Zul'Aman could probably be a lot bigger and represent more of a zone than just this dungeon. The Amani are still around, they're in Zuldazar, they're even starting to be a little less hostile. There's room for expansion and exploration there. I do want to call the video there though. I feel like if you've made it to the end, you now have a decent understanding of the history that has built Quel'Thalas into what it is today. And some of the history surrounding the splintering of the elves and such as well. That's going to be pretty foundational knowledge and understanding what Midnight does to the region. And I can't wait to talk about what I think they should go hard into. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for the support. Every like and comment and subscribe and view is so helpful. Pivoting this channel from the content that I covered previously to talking about WoW, which I've always wanted to do, has been a real journey for me, and the kind words have really meant a lot. I look forward to hearing what you'd like to see them explore in Midnight, but for now, I'm gonna go play WoW instead of just talking about it. Until next time, okay, bye.